They're made. No, I'm just kidding. So it's something we deal with. It's something we think about. The question of what is the meaning of life. And tonight's session is called "A Meaning That Cannot Be Destroyed." A meaning that cannot be destroyed. So, what do we actually mean when we talk about meaning? This is the first point here. What do we mean by meaning? What are we actually talking about when we talk about the meaning of life? Now, in common usage, the term "to mean" has two overlapping senses. These two things go together and they overlap. It's purpose and significance. Purpose and significance. Something has meaning if it has intention behind it. If it has purpose. All right? So if something has intention, if it has purpose, then we say that thing has meaning. If something points to something beyond itself, all right, we say it has significance. So if there is intention behind it, and if meaning points to something beyond itself, then that is significance. And these two come together. Let me give you an example of how they come together. If you see a group of rocks laying on the ground, and you ask the question, do these rocks mean anything? Well, that depends, doesn't it? It depends on purpose and it depends on significance. For instance, if they're just a jumbled mess on the ground that happened because there was rain and the rocks slid down the hill and just fell a certain way on the ground, and you say, do these rocks have meaning? We'd be like, well, no, they fell down the hill. There was a rainstorm and it got everything muddy and wet and the rocks just tumbled down and here they are on the ground in this mess. However, if those rocks form an arrow on the ground and they point to the next town, then we would say, oh, no, it does mean something. These rocks mean something. And here's why. Because it has purpose and it has significance. It has purpose in the sense that somebody arranged those rocks in such a way that there was intention behind the way those rocks are laid, and it points to something greater than itself. The point isn't to go, oh, neat, an arrow. The point is to go, that arrow points to a town. Okay? So purpose and significance go together. When people ask this question of themselves, does my life have meaning? They are asking it about the things they do in life, the things that they are involved in. Does all of this making and does all of this getting and does all of this doing actually matter? Does it make a difference? Does it accomplish anything beyond itself? Does my work mean anything other than just the work? Does my family mean anything other than just my family? Is the check that I get and the things that I gather in my life and the life that I live, does it matter? Is there purpose behind it, and is there significance pointing to something greater than myself? There is a physician and author, his name is Atul Gawande. He tells this story about a nurse. It's a true story about a nursing home. And what happened to this nursing home is they basically decided, we are going to get a bunch of animals, and we're gonna buy those animals. We're gonna bring them into the nursing home, and we are gonna have the patients here at the residents here at this nursing home take ownership of these pets. And so what they did is they got parrots, they got cats, they got dogs, and they got rabbits. And they started encouraging the residents here at this nursing home to begin taking care of these pets. And what they found very quickly is that the residents begin to wake up, they begin to come to life. People that they thought were not able to speak started speaking. People who were completely withdrawn started showing up at the nurse's station saying, can I take the dog for a walk? Can I feed the dog today? Can I give the dog a bone? Can I go clean the parrot's cage? All of a sudden, these patients that they thought couldn't talk, couldn't speak, they were withdrawn and reserved, they didn't care about life anymore. As soon as they had a purpose and a reason outside of just their existence in that nursing home, all of a sudden they begin to come alive. And the statistics, here are two statistics. There were a lot of them, but here's two of them. The need for drugs that they used because the patients were agitated. They have to give drugs a lot of times to nursing home patients because they're very agitated about things. The need for those drugs dropped 38% in that nursing home. 38%.
They should do that all over the place.
And deaths dropped 15%. And Atul Gawande said this: the reason why is because they had a meaning. Their life had a meaning. Their life had purpose, intentionality, and it had significance. Therefore, it had meaning. It can be traced to a fundamental need in every human being to have a reason to live that is beyond ourselves. Every human being has a fundamental need to live for something beyond themselves. That is what we mean when we say meaning. Now today we have a crisis of meaning. Okay, and that's the next point, the crisis of meaning. Today in Western culture, there are some people, okay, this is a very small number, but there are some people who say that this question about the meaning of life is pointless. There are some people who say, they don't like the phrase. They say nature is all that there is, right? Carl Sagan, the cosmos is the ultimate. Nature is all that there is. So there is no ultimate meaning to the universe. Therefore, it is pointless for you to ask the question, what is the ultimate meaning of my life? If there is no ultimate meaning in the universe, then there is no ultimate meaning of my life. Now, of course, I would like to say that those who say that are at least being consistent with their worldview. Okay? Now, if you remember, I just said that's a very, very small number. Because there's very, very few secularists who are consistent in their worldview. They say nature is all that there is, and that ultimately there is no purpose or no meaning to life. But then they turn around and try to find purpose and meaning in their life. Okay, that's inconsistent, and we're going to see that in just a minute. And this is a very small group, because even among most atheists and agnostics, they want their life to have meaning. And that's because we have been created in the image of God, and there is within us a fundamental need for purpose and meaning. And so most atheists and agnostics, secularists and naturalists, all want their life to have meaning. So people go about getting meaning in two ways. Okay? Here are the two ways. This is the crisis that we're in. There's two ways people go about meaning. The first is what we call created meaning. We live in a postmodern culture. A postmodern culture that understands that any universal claim to meaning brings a form of bondage. Okay? So if I were to say to a group of secularists in this room that there is an objective, universal meaning to your life, they would reject that. They would say, no, you can't do that because now you've bound me to this certain meaning I'm supposed to have. In this view, they believe that no one has the right to tell anybody else how they should be living. Instead, they believe that we forge and we make our own meaning. There is no ultimate purpose, so we're free to create our own purpose. We are free to create our own meaning. Life is as happy and as meaningful as you make it. Okay? That's created meaning. We create it for ourselves. We make up what our meaning is. We make up what our purpose is. We make it up. It's created meaning. And life is as happy and meaningful as you make it. That is a quote by a former professing Christian who became an atheist. So I want to ask this question. Is it? Is life as happy and as meaningful as you make it?
It says so on Facebook.
Yeah.
It's in a meme.
Yeah, it says so. That has to be true. Has to be true. So there's two different questions I'd like to ask of this created meaning. Those that say that we create our own meaning. Okay, that the meaning comes from within our own feelings and in our own desires. We create our own meaning. Two questions that I want to ask. Is this view consistent, and is this view practical? Is it consistent, and is it practical? All right, so skeptics, agnostics, atheists, they denounce all absolute value and inherent meanings in the name of what? Freedom. Don't tell me what there is, that there's a meaning outside of what I desire, because now I'm not free to determine my own meaning. So you're binding me up. So I've got to have the freedom to determine my own meaning. Okay? And so objective meaning, absolute meaning, get rid of that nonsense for the sake of freedom. But do you notice what they're doing? They're smuggling in universal meaning into their claim that there shouldn't be absolute universal meaning. Haven't they already declared that freedom is a universal meaning? If they say to all of us, you can't tell me what my absolute meaning is because I have to be free to decide that for myself. Haven't they just declared that freedom is an absolute meaning that they have to have? They've just completely denied the very thing that they're saying they want. They're saying we gotta have freedom. So here's my question: why is freedom so important? According to their worldview, why is that considered a good thing? Why is freedom good? Who says you need to have freedom to determine your own meaning? Who decided that? Where did that come from? And why should I listen to them? How can you say that I should give people freedom to determine their own meaning, at the same time tell me that I can't tell people what they're supposed to do with meaning? You're telling me you have to give people freedom to make their own meaning. That sounds to me like an absolute. And then you're telling me, but don't be absolute. Well, so you can be absolute, but then I can't be absolute? And if you are being absolute and I'm being absolute, how do we determine whose absolute is absolutely the right one? I love this question. When people say that I have to give people freedom to determine their own meaning, does that mean that I am free to reject your freedom? If I've got to have freedom to determine my own meaning, what if the meaning that I come up with is to stop your freedom? Is my freedom still good? You see what happens? It just becomes an inconsistent mess. It literally just becomes nonsense. Who makes the rules? Who decides? And in my attempt to get you to get rid of absolutes, I have to create an absolute just to get you to stop doing that? So they're doing the very thing they're telling others not to do. It's like this simple statement. And this doesn't necessarily come with meaning, but it shows the hypocrisy or the inconsistency. When someone says, there are no absolutes, you realize what they just did. They used an absolute statement to say there are no absolutes. There is no absolute meaning, but you got to let everybody have their freedom. Then you're saying freedom is the absolute that we all have to abide by. You're destroying your own position. So it is not consistent. So the next question is it practical? Is it practical for human beings to just create their own meaning, their own purpose in life? Is life just what you make it? If that is true, then everything in existence really is all just in your own head. And you're never really out of your own head. But the truth is, life outside of our head exists, doesn't it? Like, it's a reality. You can be delusional in your mind, but that won't change the reality that exists outside of your own head. At some point, you're going to run into that reality that exists. In other words, life has a meaning that is outside of your head, whether you want to believe that or not. That reality is at some point going to butt up against just what you've created in your own mind. For example, if you determine in your own mind that tigers are cuddly and cute, and then you try to act that out by getting in their cage and playing with the tiger, it will not end well. Now, in your mind, you've determined that this tiger is cuddly and cute. But there is a reality about that tiger that exists outside of your mind. And your mind can say whatever you want it to say, but that does not change the reality of what will happen if you get inside the tiger's cage. You can say all day long that you create your own meaning and that your life has its own meaning. However, there is a reality outside of your own head, outside of your own mind, that ultimately you're going to run up against. So is it consistent? No, of course it's not consistent. Is it practical? Of course it's not practical. You can't actually live out. People who say that we create our own meaning cannot actually live that out. It is impossible to live out. If they go to the final, obvious conclusion of their worldview, they can't live it out. We'll talk more about that in just a minute. Now, the other way of getting meaning is called discovered meaning. So you have created meaning, where people create meaning in and of themselves. And then you have discovered meaning. Now, there is a significant difference between creating a meaning or determining a meaning. Discovering a meaning means this. There is a reality outside of me. There is a meaning to my life outside of me. And my job is to form my life according to that meaning. There is an objective meaning out there for my life. And I've got to form my life to that. I don't get to determine my meaning for myself. I know that that meaning exists, and it's true for everyone about how I feel about it or how I interpret it. If we were made by God for certain purposes, then there is a meaning that I must accept. Doesn't matter how I feel about it. Doesn't matter how I interpret things. God has made me for a specific purpose. Then my job is to align my life to that meaning. And I must accept it. Of course, as we read in the Westminster Shorter Catechism, the chief end of man is to glorify God and enjoy Him forever. If that is my meaning, if that is the objective meaning that God has determined for human existence, then my job is not to create the meaning of my own choosing, but to align my life with that objective meaning. And there you have it in front of you, Isaiah 43, 20 through 21. Isaiah 66, 18 through 19. Psalm 29, 1 through 2. 1 Corinthians 6, 20 and 10, 31. Those are just a few of the verses that tell us in Scripture human beings have been made by God to glorify Him. To delight in Him and glorify Him. That is the meaning of life. And it doesn't matter how you feel about it. It doesn't matter how you interpret things. That is the objective meaning. Okay? That's what we're calling discovered meaning. Now, I want to give you 3 things on why discovered meaning is better than created meaning. Okay? Why is it better to have discovered meaning? Why is that a better way than created meaning? First, discovered meaning is more rational than created meaning. Discovered meaning is more rational than created meaning on any practical level. Let me explain this. For us to consider any activity meaningful, like work, making money, whatever it may be, any activity we're involved in order for us to consider that activity meaningful, we have to ask the question, what is it for? What's the point of it? Why do I work? Why do I make money? What's it for? What's the point of it? We do this by attaching something larger than ourselves to it. But look what happens if we have a created meaning. Let's go through this thought experiment. Here's the question. What is the point of caring for our health? Someone may answer. Well, in order for caring for your health to have meaning, it's got to be something beyond that, right? Well, so we can work. We need to care for our health so that we can work. What is then the point of working? Well, we need to work so that we can care for our family, so that we can create jobs, so that we can give to charity. Then here comes the problem. There is always the same question waiting at the end of each statement. What's the point then of family? What's the point of creating jobs for others? What's the point of giving to charity? And all you're doing is you're just working your way up the chain, right? You're just simply asking the next question and the next question of each statement. So the first one is, why do we care about our health? Well, so we can work. Why do we work? So that we can take care of our family. Why do we take care of our family? Well, because we want them to succeed. Why do we want them to succeed? Well, we want them to succeed because they'll have a better life. Well, why do they need to have a better life? Well, you see what happens as you work your way up the chain? Those questions become more and more difficult to answer. The more you go down that rabbit hole, the harder and harder those questions become in answering. Because there's always the next question, and the next question, and the next question. And in the end, the final answer of a secularist, of a skeptic, of an agnostic, of an atheist, the final conclusion must be that there is no final answer. Nothing makes a difference. Everything we do is ultimately insignificant. Nothing counts forever. Now let me be honest with you. That is the logical conclusion of a naturalistic secular worldview. If nature is all that there is, then nothing matters. Ultimately, there is no significance. There is no meaning, and there is no purpose. You're going to come up to that chain, eventually you're going to get to the place where you go, then none of this matters. None of this matters. Everything that you make, everything in your life is just fizzing chemical reactions in your brain that causes you to act one way or another, but it doesn't really matter. So do you know what the best thing that a secularist or a naturalist or an atheist or agnostic, you know the best thing they can do? Stop thinking. It's the truth. Stop worrying about the logical conclusions of your worldview. That's why the vast majority of them are inconsistent. Because they just don't want to think about that. They don't want to have to deal with the fact that their worldview leads to meaninglessness. So they just stop asking the big questions. Stop dealing with the big questions. However, Christianity is the very opposite, isn't it? Think about this. Think about Christianity. Christians do not say to themselves that they need to stop thinking about the implications of what they believe about the universe. If a Christian feels like they do not have a purpose, if a Christian feels like they lack significance, it's because they're not being rational enough. They're not thinking enough about the implications of what they believe. If someone comes to my office and they sit down with me and they say, man, I just don't feel like I have a purpose in life. They're a Christian now, and they're saying, I just don't feel like I have a purpose in life. I don't feel like I have significance. I am not going to tell them, hey man, just stop worrying about those big questions. That'll fix you. That'll help. No, you know what I'm going to do? We're going to dive into those big questions. And what I want them to do is start thinking about, do you realize what you live for outside of yourself? Do you realize what is coming when Jesus comes back? Do you realize why all this matters right now? See, what I'm doing is I want to take that person and I want them to dive more rationally and logically into their belief system. I don't want to tell them, hey man, stop worrying about those big questions. You just eat, drink, and be merry today because that's all that matters. No, we said the opposite. No, you got to think more about this. You're not thinking about this hard enough. You need to think more about why we're here and what we're doing and what's going to happen when Jesus comes back. You know what Paul does when people are discouraged because their loved ones have died? Paul doesn't say, hey guys, stop worrying about the big questions. Just don't worry about it. Stop worrying about it. It's not a big deal. You just worry about today. Is that what Paul does? Or does Paul say, there is a resurrection of the dead coming? You need to think harder about what it is we actually believe. You need to dive deeper into it because look at the end result of our worldview. So take heart. This is not the end. So the secularist or the naturalist wants to avoid the big question. Okay? That's less rational, less reasonable. The Christian, on the other hand, pushes into that. So discovered meaning, that is outside of ourselves, that discovered meaning comes, we find it and we have it, and it is more rational than that we just create on our own. So, if an atheist is going to have peace in this world, it's going to come because they stop thinking about their worldview, not because they dive deeper into it. If Christians are going to have peace in this world, it's because we dive deeper into our worldview. See the difference? That's why it's more rational. Number 2, discovered meaning is more communal than created meaning. Until the modern age, all the main sources of meaning of life, religion, family, art, they were all tightly interrelated and public. Okay? Meaning of life, how we find meaning in life, they were all tied together and they were very public community things. Harvard philosopher Josiah Royce in 1908, he wrote a book called The Philosophy of Loyalty, in which he sought to answer the big questions about the meaning of life. Why wasn't it good enough just to eat, sleep, work, and do normal activities? Why can't human beings just be happy with that? Of course, his answer is that human beings could not live without dedication to a cause more important than their individual interests. They need to sacrifice for something bigger. Have you ever noticed you can be in a movie theater with people, and probably the vast majority of the people in that room are not Christians, and you're watching a movie where somebody sacrifices themselves for others, and everyone in that room will not necessarily literally applaud, but they are applauding that action. Why? Because we think that matters, don't we? We think sacrificing our individual interest for the whole is a good thing. However, Royce therefore believed that finding the meaning of life, one has to reject individualism. We can't be running around just saying, I want to seek my own meaning, I want to seek my own purpose in life, and it doesn't matter what anybody else has, I want to determine that for me. Well, guess what happens if I determine that for me, and if Shelby determines it for her, and Amy determines it for her, Brother James determines it for him. If everybody in this room begins to create our own meanings, guess what we will not be? We will not be united. We're all going to be doing our own thing, instead of being united around a meaning that all of us have. So you see, every individual that seeks his or her own meaning will have fewer and fewer shared values or shared meanings, and this will erode unity. It will erode public institutions where we all agree these are good things. It will lead to polarization. It will lead to everything being fragmented. And ironically, according to Royce, individualism undermines individual happiness. Think about it. If I'm watching a movie and everyone in the room agrees that sacrificing yourself for somebody else is a good thing. If we all agree on that, we can come together around that, can't we? That's something we share. That's a value we have in common. Well, now let's pretend that everyone in that room doesn't agree with that, doesn't share that view. Now, all of a sudden, that unity that we would have is now fragmented and ripped apart. Now we can't come together on that. And you know what happens in postmodern societies? You know what happens in the West? Are we being more and more unified, or are we being more and more ripped apart? We're being more and more ripped apart, aren't we? And the reason why is because everyone's determining their own meaning. This person's determining their meaning, this person's determining their meaning, this person's determining their meaning. However, in Christianity, guess what? We all have the same meaning, don't we? Every Christian has the same goals and meaning. We are here to glorify Jesus. We are here to spread the gospel. We are here to love on each other and to give of ourselves. So Christians can rally around a meaning that we all agree on. An objective meaning for our lives where we can come together. Martin Luther King Jr., when he wanted to show white people in the South, and mainly white churchgoers in the South, that they should step up and end racial injustice, did he do this by telling them, all you guys should just discover your own meaning in life? Is that what he did? No. In his famous I Have a Dream speech, he quotes Amos 5:54, calling for justice to roll down on this nation. You know what he's doing? He's saying there is a meaning. There is an objective thing that we all should stand for. Doesn't matter how you feel about it. Justice matters. And he called people to get rid of whatever you think should be happening and get to the objective meaning. So ironically, those who say that we are free to create our own meaning might actually be less liberated and more captive to consumerism and individual culture than they think they are. But Christians, however, discovered meaning that we have, revealed meaning given to us, unifies us. So discovered meaning is more communal than created meaning. And lastly, discovered meaning is more durable than created meanings. If you say there is no transcendent meaning, there is no God that is transcendent to where my life needs to be aligned up with that meaning. If you say that, and you agree to the created meaning thing, right, where you make your own meaning up, where will you find all of your meaning in life? It has to be here in the world, right? If there's nothing transcendent, if there's nothing transcendent where we can find a meaning, then any meaning I'm going to have, that I'm going to create for myself, has to be found here in this world, here in this life. Right? You agree on that? Here's the problem with that. What do we know about the things of this world? They fall apart, don't they? They get taken from us. The stock market goes up, that's my meaning in life. Well, it can go down. My family is my life, they're my meaning. Well, they can be taken away. You see, whatever, if there is no transcendent meaning, and you're creating your own meaning, you have to create it from things inside of nature. And we know those things are fragile. And those things can be taken away. So what happens to your meaning when it's not durable? What happens to your meaning when it's not something that lasts? When suffering disrupts the meaning that you have created for yourself. You see, the secular approach leaves you vulnerable to the realities of how life's going to go in the world. We saw this play out in Nazi Germany. There's been a lot of studies of the concentration camps and the way that people inside of those camps, the prisoners and victims inside of those camps reacted. And one of the most common conclusions is that religious beliefs played the major factor on whether or not someone would just give up in the concentration camp. They said less religious people that were in concentration camps would either give up or they would flip and actually aid the Nazis. But religious people would be stronger. They would fight to live because they believed this is more than just about me. This suffering is more than just about me. It was more durable. All the studies showed that those prisoners who had deep religious beliefs stayed stronger and fought to survive more than those who were non-religious. By the way, they said that this radically surprised their captors. They were not expecting this. And it's because they believed that they were living for something greater than themselves. In the Christian faith, becoming like Christ, living with God and with others forever, is what our ultimate is. And guess what? That can never be taken away by suffering, can it? That can never be taken away by hardship. Never. In fact, we Christians say suffering actually aids to that end. We believe that God uses suffering to mold us into our ultimate meaning, which is to be like Christ. Whereas suffering will rip right out of the hands of people who are creating their own meaning, will rip the meaning right out of their life by taking it away. For a Christian, nothing that happens on this side of eternity can rip away our ultimate meaning. Nothing. Because our ultimate meaning lies outside of just this natural world. And so it is more durable. It is simply more durable to have a meaning that is outside of yourself. And outside of this, that is transcendent. That is glorifying God. Becoming Christ-like. I want to end with this last point. Simply called the end of meaninglessness. Or meaningless. We have an entire book in our Bible, and I want you to turn there, the book of Ecclesiastes. We've done this before, but I thought this would be a great way to end tonight. The book of Ecclesiastes. It is a very confusing book for people. If you read that book, you're going to wonder, what in the world, why is this book in the Bible? The whole thing just is weird. It's troubling. I don't even know how to interpret this. However, this is a book that is so relative to our postmodern society. It's crazy. I went through and read most of it again this weekend. And it's crazy to me how relevant it is for today. The book opens in verse 2 saying, "Vanity of vanities, says the preacher, vanity of vanities, all is vanity." You know what another translation of this Hebrew word could be? Meaningless, meaningless, says the preacher, meaningless, meaningless, all is meaningless. Wow, that's a great way to start a book that's going to encourage you. Everything is pointless. Wow, can't wait to read more of this. This is gonna be encouraging. That's the thesis of the entire book. I mean, that's the point of the entire book. It can be found right here. It can be found in chapter 2, verse 11. It can be found in verse 2:17, 2:20, 2:22. That's the thesis of his book. There is vanity, there is meaninglessness in all of our lives. So he does this huge thought experiment. This book, Ecclesiastes, is a huge thought experiment. Here's what he says. Everything is meaningless. And he delves into sensual pleasures. Eroticism. And you know what he says? Meaningless. He delves into philosophy. Knowledge and understanding. The intellect. You know what he says? Meaningless. He delves into work and achievement. You know what he says? Meaningless. He finds that everything in the natural world will fail to provide meaning in the face of life's reality. Nothing in this world can actually ultimately mean anything apart from a transcendent God. So the whole book is him saying, none of this stuff's going to matter. None of this stuff's going to matter. Now, you know what's sad about Solomon? Who I believe is the one who wrote this book. You know what's sad about Solomon? He had to learn all this the hard way. Solomon isn't just saying, hey, I heard some stories about how this is meaningless. You know, Solomon can say, I tried to fill my life with this. Like, I started off really good. I started off really, really good. And then I walked away from the Lord, and I tried to seek meaning in all of these things. And it was meaningless. And then he comes to the end of the book. Turn to chapter 12. Comes to the end of the book. Look at verse 13 of Ecclesiastes chapter 12. Just when you think the whole book is going to be a depressing downer, he says, the end of the matter. When it's all said and done, and you wonder what really matters. What really matters. And what is it that will give everything else meaning? And that's really the conclusion here. If all of this is meaningless, how do we make it have meaning? Solomon isn't saying it's pointless to have a family. It's pointless to have money. It's pointless to work. It's pointless to learn. That's not what his ultimate conclusion is. He's saying, what is it that will give all this stuff actual meaning? The end of the matter, when all has been heard, here it is. Fear God. Fear God. Transcendent. Something greater. That the phrase in Ecclesiastes that's used all the time is under the sun. Under the sun. He's talking about things in our world. Things that are natural. Fear God. Guess what? He's transcendent, isn't he? He's supernatural. He's transcendent. Fear God and do what? And obey him. Fear God and obey him. If you want all the stuff in your life to have meaning, then you've got to fear God and obey him. But if you eliminate him, ultimately, meaningless, everything is meaningless. And he says, and I know it firsthand because I tried it. Doesn't work. Fear God. Obey him. He will give meaning to everything. Do you remember our series when we talked about treasuring the things of the world and the things of the earth? And do you remember we drew, and we've done this in multiple different series in here, but remember we drew on the whiteboard the difference between taking a priority list and starting with number 1 and writing it down. Number 1's God, number 2's family, number 3's work, number 4's the Mavericks, number 5. You know, like you make your list, right? From 1 to infinity. And really we said that's really not a great way to look at life. And the better way is to picture a wheel with Christ at the center, and you have all the spokes coming off the wheel, and around the wheel is all the things in your life. How will my family have meaning? Only if I fear God and obey him. Does it give that ultimate meaning? How does my job of a pastor have ultimate meaning? Only if I fear God and obey him. How does your life have ultimate meaning? All the things around the spokes of that wheel. How will any of those things have meaning? Fear God and obey. If you eliminate that, then you got to create your own meaning. You got to create your own meaning. It is inconsistent. Ultimately, the ultimate is that it's purposeless. It is not practical. It is not durable. It is not rational. And ultimately, it will not give you what it is that you need. So, when it comes to giving meaning in life, Christianity is the only reasonable